The Great Hall of the Galactic Council buzzed with quiet conversation as representatives from 47 different species took their seats. The weekly assessment meeting was about to begin, and today's topic was humanity. Ambassador Zexithari of the Vorthak Empire stood at the central podium, his scaled hands moving across a holographic display. "Fellow council members," Zexithari began, his voice carrying through the translation systems, "we gather today to review the human species and their place in our galactic community." He pressed a button, and the air above the podium filled with moving pictures from the past 10 years. The first image showed a human diplomat bowing deeply to a hegemony coalition representative. The human was apologizing for a minor trade dispute that wasn't even his fault. The coalition representative looked bored as the human offered to give up mining rights on 2 asteroid belts. "As you can see," Zexithari continued, "humans are remarkably cooperative." The next image showed human colonists quietly leaving their homes on Kepler 442b after the Silicon hierarchy claimed the planet for themselves. The humans loaded their belongings onto small transport ships without complaint. Some even helped. The new alien settlers moved their equipment. Counselor Thexmos, whose digital consciousness flickered in a crystalline form, made a sound that the translator interpreted as laughter. They simply walk away from their own planets. How wonderfully submissive. More images followed. Humans accepting unfavorable trade deals. Human ships changing course when alien vessels demanded right-of-way. Human ambassadors apologizing for speaking too loudly in council meetings. In every single recording, humans appeared weak, eager to please, and afraid of conflict. Admiral Jake Morrison sat in the observer section, watching the presentation with a stone face. He was the human representative to the council, though he rarely spoke unless directly asked a question. His uniform was simple compared to the elaborate clothing worn by other species representatives. Next to him, Lieutenant Amy Carter took careful notes on a small device. "The question before us today," Zexithari announced, "is how to best utilize this species. They are excellent workers, they follow orders without question, and they never cause trouble. I propose we assign them to manual labor and resource extraction across our territories." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. The Drakmari representative, whose tentacles writhed with excitement, spoke up. "My people could use help in the deep mines of Proxima Station. Humans seem perfect for dangerous work." "Indeed," added the representative from the Crystalline Collective. "They appear to value their lives so little that they would accept any assignment." Amy Carter slid a data tablet to Admiral Morrison. On the screen was a message that made his jaw tighten. 3 human colony worlds had gone silent in the past week. Titan's Rest, New Montana, and Providence Station had all stopped responding to communications after refusing to surrender their mining operations to various alien factions. Morrison's hands, which had been slightly shaking from controlled anger, suddenly became perfectly still. Amy noticed this change and felt a chill run down her spine. She had served with Morrison for 5 years and knew that when his hands stopped shaking, someone was about to have a very bad day. The presentation continued with more examples of human weakness. The council members laughed at footage of human. Children sharing their lunch with hungry alien refugees. They mocked human doctors who treated alien patients for free. They found it amusing that humans sent aid to planets struck by natural disasters, even when those planets belonged to species that had been hostile to Earth. "Truly remarkable," said Counselor Vexnall of the Hegemony Coalition. "They seem incapable of putting their own interests first." It's almost as if they suffer from some genetic defect that prevents proper survival instincts. The laughter in the chamber grew louder. Some representatives made jokes about humans being professionally apologetic and allergic to conflict. The Vorthak ambassador suggested that humans might be useful as diplomatic pets since they were cute and harmless. Morrison continued to sit quietly, but Amy could see a muscle in his cheek twitching. She knew he was thinking about the 12 million human civilians on those 3 silent worlds. She also knew he was thinking about what the aliens didn't know. "I call for a vote," Zexathari announced. "All in favor of reallocating current human territories to more suitable species and reassigning human populations to labor duties across our member worlds." One by one, hands, tentacles, energy fields, and crystalline formations rose in agreement. 46 votes in favor, 0 against, 0 abstentions. The decision was unanimous. "Excellent," Zexathari said. "To demonstrate the Council's authority and ensure all species understand our decision, we will broadcast this reallocation live across all galactic networks. Let this serve as an example of how the Council handles species that lack the strength to defend their own interests." Admiral Morrison slowly raised his hand. The gesture was so unexpected that the entire chamber fell silent. It had been 3 years since the human representative had spoken during a council session. "Yes, Admiral Morrison?" Zexathari asked with barely concealed amusement. "Do you wish to thank the Council for their generous offer of employment for your species?" Morrison stood up slowly. His voice was calm and measured when he spoke. "Honored Council members, I would like to request permission to address this body regarding the colonies that have gone silent." "Of course," Thexmos said, his digital form flickering with what seemed like humor. "Please, tell us how your people plan to accept their new roles." Morrison nodded politely. "The 3 colonies represent over 12 million human civilians. They were pioneers who built communities on worlds that were considered uninhabitable by other species. They turned barren rocks into thriving settlements through years of hard work. And now, they will work for their betters," Councillor Vexnal interrupted. "Surely you understand that resources are wasted when placed in the hands of such a passive species." Morrison's expression didn't change, but Amy noticed his breathing had become very controlled. "I would like to request a brief recess to consult with Earth Command regarding the implementation of your decision." The request sent ripples of amusement through the chamber. The idea that humans might need to consult about accepting orders was apparently hilarious to most council members. "Granted," Zexathari said with exaggerated generosity. "Take all the time you need. We understand that your species requires extra time to process complex decisions." Morrison nodded again, the picture of politeness. "Thank you for your patience. I will return shortly with our response." As he walked toward the communications chamber, Amy fell into step beside him. The other council members continued talking, among themselves, making jokes about human inefficiency and speculating about which species would get which human territories. None of them noticed that Admiral Morrison had stopped shaking entirely. None of them realized they had just made the worst mistake in galactic history. The communications chamber was a small, quiet room behind the main council hall. Admiral Morrison activated the secure channel to Earth Command, while Amy Carter stood guard at the door. The connection crackled to life, showing the face of Admiral Lisa Rodriguez aboard the UES Defiance. "Jake," Rodriguez said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "We've been monitoring the council session. Tell me they didn't just vote to steal our colonies." Morrison's polite diplomatic mask slipped for the first time in years. They did. Unanimous vote. They think we're too weak to stop them. He paused, looking directly into the camera. Lisa, they're treating this like a joke. They're laughing about using human children as manual labor. Rodriguez was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was deadly calm. How many council members voted for this? All of them. 46 species. They want to broadcast the territory reallocation live to show other species what happens to the weak. And the missing colonies? Morrison glanced at Amy, who was monitoring the hallway. Over 12 million civilians. The council representative called them wasted resources in passive hands. Admiral Rodriguez looked off camera for a moment, then back at Morrison. Jake, you've been playing the nice diplomat for 10 years. You've taken their insults, accepted their condescension, and let them think we're harmless. The question is, are you ready to stop playing nice? Morrison was quiet for several seconds. When he answered, his voice carried a tone that Amy had never heard before. Give me something to work with, Lisa. Something that will make them understand. They've made a mistake. Rodriguez smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. Oh, Jake, we've been preparing for this day since the moment we joined their little club. Every insult, every dismissal, every time they've underestimated us has been building to this moment. She turned to someone off camera. Kevin, show Admiral Morrison what we've got positioned around their homeworlds. The display switched to a tactical readout that made Morrison's eyes widen. Red dots appeared around dozens of star systems, each dot representing a human vessel. Not the small escort ships the Council knew about, but massive warships that dwarfed anything in the known galaxy. Sweet mother of, Morrison whispered. 300 ships, Jake. Each one invisible to their sensors until we decide otherwise. We've been building this fleet in the dark spaces between systems for 8 years. Every time they dismissed us as harmless, we launched another ship they couldn't detect. Amy moved closer to look at the display. Admiral, how did we hide ships? That big? Rodriguez's smile widened. Amy, meet Captain Nicole Barnes. She's been in charge of our escort vessel program. Another face appeared on the screen, a woman with short brown hair and eyes that seemed to sparkle with mischief. Lieutenant Carter, those cute little patrol boats the Council sees when they visit our systems, each one is carrying enough firepower to level a city. We've just been keeping the weapons powered down. Morrison stared at the tactical display. Lisa, this is insane. We've been pretending to be weak while building the most powerful fleet in galactic history? Not pretending, Jake. We've been patient. There's a difference. Every time they pushed us around, we learned something. Every time they dismissed our technology, we improved it. Every time they treated us like children, we planned for the day they'd realize their mistake. Captain Barnes leaned into view. Admiral Morrison, would you like to know what's really funny? Those mining operations. They think they're taking over? We've been using them as cover to build defense platforms. The colony worlds they're so eager to claim are now the most heavily fortified positions in the galaxy. Amy shook her head in amazement. How long have you been planning this? Rodriguez turned serious. Amy, from the day we first made contact, with alien life we knew this moment would come. Not because we wanted a fight, but because bullies always push until someone pushes back. We spent 10 years hoping we were wrong. But we weren't, Morrison said quietly. No, we weren't. Jake, they just voted to enslave our species. They laughed about it. They think it's entertaining that human children might die in their minds. Rodriguez paused. The question is, what do you want us to do about it? Morrison looked at the tactical display again. Human ships surrounded every major alien homeworld. Invisible weapons platforms protected every human colony. The species that had dismissed humanity as weak and passive had no idea they were completely surrounded. What are our options? Morrison asked. Captain Barnes spoke up. We can make this quick and clean. Disable their military assets, secure our territory, and open negotiations from a position of strength. Or, Amy prompted. Rodriguez finished the thought. Or we can give them exactly what they gave us. 10 years of condescension, humiliation, and treating us like we don't matter. Morrison was quiet for a long time. Finally, he asked, if I go back in there and try diplomacy one more time, what happens? They'll laugh at you again, Rodriguez said simply. They'll assume we're begging for mercy and probably make their terms worse. And if I go back in there with proof that they've underestimated us, then they'll learn that humans can be very, very unforgiving when their children are threatened. Morrison nodded slowly. Lisa, how quickly can you have ships in position around the council station? Jake, we've had ships around the council station for 3 years. The entire Vorthak war fleet that's supposed to be protecting this place. We've been watching them the whole time. They have no idea we're here. Amy stared at the screen. Admiral Rodriguez, are you saying we could take control of this station right now if we wanted to? Amy, we could take control of this entire system without breaking a sweat. The only reason we haven't is because Admiral Morrison asked us to be patient while he tried the diplomatic approach. Morrison stood up straighter. The diplomatic approach just died in that council chamber. They want to see what happens when humans stop being polite? He looked directly at Rodriguez. Show them. Rodriguez nodded. Jake, I need you to go back in there and give them one last chance. One final opportunity to realize they've made a mistake and withdraw their vote. And if they refuse, then we stop pretending to be the weak, harmless species they think we are. Rodriguez turned to Captain Barnes. Nicole, prepare the demonstration package. Full disclosure protocols. Yes, ma'am. Admiral Morrison, when you go back in there, you'll have everything you need to show them exactly who they're dealing with. Morrison straightened his uniform and put his diplomatic mask back on. But Amy could see something different in his eyes now. The patient, apologetic human ambassador was gone. In his place was something the council had never seen before. A human who was done being nice. Amy, Morrison said quietly, when we go back in there, I want you to record everything. Every reaction, every word, every moment when they realize what they've done. Yes, sir. Admiral Morrison? Yes? Are we really going to do this? Morrison looked at her with eyes that had seen too many human children forced to work in alien mines, too many colonies abandoned to aggressive species, too many years of his people being treated like amusing pets. Amy, they just declared war on humanity. They think we're too weak to fight back. He moved toward the door. They're about to learn how wrong they are. Admiral Morrison walked back into the council chamber, carrying a small silver device. The conversation died down as he made his way to the central speaking area. Amy Carter followed, her recording equipment active and her heart beating fast. She had never seen her commanding officer look so calm, and that terrified her. Honored council members, Morrison began, his voice carrying the same polite tone he had used for 10 years. I have consulted with Earth Command regarding your decision to reallocate human territories and reassign human populations. Zexathari leaned forward with obvious amusement. And what did your superiors say, Admiral? I trust they understand the generous nature of our offer. Morrison placed the silver device on the speaker's podium. They asked me to share their response with the council. He pressed a button, and the air above the podium began to shimmer with light. A three-dimensional image formed, showing a large room filled with uniformed humans standing around massive displays covered in tactical information. At the center stood a tall man with gray hair and hard eyes. His uniform bore more decorations than anyone in the council chamber had ever seen on a human. "Greetings, Galactic Council," the man said, his voice clear and strong through the projection system. "I am General Paul Harris, Supreme Commander of Earth Defense Forces. Admiral Morrison has informed me of your vote regarding human territories and populations." The council members shifted in their seats. They had never seen a human military officer who carried himself with such obvious authority. General Harris looked like someone who expected to be obeyed, not someone who would apologize for taking up space. "For 10 years, Harris continued, humanity has participated in your galactic community as peaceful members. We have followed your laws, respected your customs, and sought to resolve conflicts through diplomacy." His expression hardened. "Today, you voted to steal our worlds and enslave our people." Murmurs began around the chamber, but Harris wasn't finished. "You made this decision because you believe humans are weak. You think we are passive and unable to defend ourselves." Harris turned to face a large tactical display behind him. "I would like to correct that misunderstanding." The display lit up with a map of the galaxy. Red dots began appearing around star systems. Dozens of them, then hundreds. Each dot pulsed with a soft light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with heartbeats. "What you are seeing," Harris explained calmly, "are human military vessels. Not the escort ships you've grown accustomed to seeing, but our actual fleet. 317 ships, each one more powerful than your largest dreadnoughts." The council chamber erupted in shocked voices. Councillor Thexmos's digital form flickered wildly. "Impossible! Our sensors would have detected vessels of that size." Harris smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Your sensors see exactly what we want them to see. For 8 years, we have been building this fleet in the spaces between your patrol routes. Every time you dismissed us as harmless, we launched another ship you couldn't detect." Zexathari's scaled hands gripped his chair arms. "You're bluffing. If humans possessed such technology, why hide it?" "Because we hoped we would never need to use it," Harris replied. "We believed that peaceful coexistence was possible. We thought that by being good neighbors, we could avoid conflict." His voice grew colder. "You have proven us wrong." The tactical display zoomed in on specific systems, showing red dots surrounding alien homeworlds. The Vorthak home system showed 6 massive human ships in formation around their planet. The Silicon hierarchy's central node was bracketed by vessels that dwarfed their most powerful constructs. Every major homeworld, every military base, every strategic position in council space is currently under our weapons. Harris looked directly into the projection camera, and his eyes seemed to bore into every council member. "You wanted to know what humans do when threatened? You're about to find out." Ambassador Morrison stepped forward. "General Harris, please show the council what our escort vessels really are." Harris nodded to someone off-screen. "Admiral Rodriguez, demonstrate our defensive capabilities." A new voice joined the transmission, crisp and professional. "Admiral Morrison, members of the Galactic Council, this is Admiral Lisa Rodriguez aboard the UES Defiance. We are currently positioned 300 kilometers from this station." Councillor Vexnal jumped to his feet. "Impossible! Our perimeter. Sensors show no human vessels in this system. That's correct, Rodriguez replied. Your sensors are functioning perfectly. They simply cannot detect us when we don't want to be detected. There was a pause. Sensors coming online now. Every alien device in the council chamber began screaming warnings. Emergency lights flashed as proximity alarms wailed. The main display showed the space around the station, which moments before had been empty except for the Vorthak patrol fleet. Now, it showed dozens of massive human ships, each one larger than the station itself. They had appeared as if by magic, their hulls dark and threatening against the stars. "Sweet, merciful void," whispered the Drakmari representative, his tentacles going pale with shock. Admiral Rodriguez's voice continued calmly. "What you believed to be our escort vessels were actually advanced stealth ships. Each one carries enough firepower to destroy a moon. We have been protecting your convoys, guarding your trade routes, and maintaining peace in your space with weapons you never knew existed." The tactical display zoomed in on one of the human ships. Its hull opened to reveal weapons batteries that made the Council's most advanced warships look like toys. Energy readings that appeared on the screen showed power levels that should have been impossible. General Harris resumed control of the presentation. "For 10 years we have been your silent guardians. When pirates threatened trade ships, human vessels eliminated them before you knew danger existed. When natural disasters struck your worlds, human engineering teams provided assistance that you attributed to your own technology. When hostile species from outside Council space approached your borders, human fleets turned them away without your knowledge." The Council chamber was dead silent now. Representatives stared at the displays showing human ships surrounding their homeworlds, protecting their systems, and maintaining peace across the galaxy while remaining completely invisible to their sensors. "You called us weak," Harris continued. "You mocked our diplomatic efforts and dismissed our attempts at peaceful cooperation. You voted to take our worlds and enslave our children." His voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the chamber. "Gentlemen, ladies, and distinguished beings of the Galactic Council, you have made the worst mistake in your species' histories." Morrison stepped forward again. "The General has asked me to inform you that humanity's patience has officially ended. You have 6 hours to begin withdrawal from all human territories. For every hour you delay, we will assume one colony's population has been lost and respond accordingly." Zexthari found his voice, though it shook. You cannot threaten the Galactic Council. We represent 46 species. Our combined fleets," Admiral Rodriguez answered before Harris could speak. "Ambassador Zexthari, your combined fleets are outnumbered 3-to-1 by vessels they cannot see, cannot track, and cannot effectively engage. Your most advanced weapons would bounce off our shields like throwing rocks at a mountain." The projection shifted to show human ships moving into formation around the Council station. They moved with impossible grace for vessels of their size, their hulls gleaming with energy fields that made space itself seem to bend around them. General Harris spoke one final time. "Council members, humanity tried to be your friends. We offered partnership, cooperation, and mutual respect. You responded with contempt, exploitation, and now attempted enslavement." The projection began to fade. "You wanted to see what humans do when we stop being polite. Now you know." The transmission ended, leaving the Council chamber in absolute silence. Outside the great windows, human warships hung in space like sleeping giants, their weapons powered but not yet aimed. Admiral Morrison picked up his device and looked around the chamber. When he spoke, his voice carried none of the diplomatic courtesy the Council had grown accustomed to. You have 6 hours to decide. Whether you want to be our partners or our prisoners, choose wisely. The Council chamber remained frozen in stunned silence for almost a full minute after Morrison's ultimatum. Then, like a dam breaking, chaos erupted. Representatives jumped to their feet, shouting in languages that overwhelmed the translation. Systems. Emergency communication devices sparked to life as species tried to contact their homeworlds, only to discover that human ships were already there, waiting. Counselor Thexmos's digital form flickered rapidly as his consciousness tried to process the impossible data. This cannot be real, he said, his translated voice carrying electronic distortion. No species could hide technology this advanced for so long. Morrison activated his silver device again. This time, instead of General Harris, the projection showed Admiral Rodriguez standing on the bridge of her ship. Behind her, human officers worked calmly at stations that displayed more information than the Council's most advanced computers could process in a day. Council members, Rodriguez said, her voice cutting through the noise, I understand your confusion. Allow me to provide some clarification. She turned to a tall woman with red hair standing beside her. Commander Scott Murphy, please demonstrate our boarding capabilities. The woman nodded and disappeared. Not walked away, not left the screen, but simply vanished as if she had never been there. What kind of... Zexathari began, then stopped as a voice spoke directly behind him. Excuse me, Ambassador, could you tell me where I might find the coffee machine? Every head in the chamber turned to see Commander Murphy standing calmly in the center of the speaking area. She had somehow appeared inside the Council chamber without triggering any security systems, without opening any doors, and without anyone seeing her arrive. The Vorthak security guards raised their weapons, but Murphy held up a hand. Please don't point those at me. Your energy weapons tend to explode when they encounter our personal shields, and the cleanup is always messy. How did you get in here? Vexnall demanded, his voice shaking. Murphy smiled politely. I walked. Your security barriers are impressive, but they're designed to stop beings who obey conventional physics. We've learned to be more flexible. She looked around the chamber with genuine curiosity. This is a beautiful building, by the way. The architecture is quite lovely. Morrison watched the council members' faces as they realized they're most secure. Facility had been completely penetrated by a single human who seemed to consider it a casual stroll. Commander Murphy is here to demonstrate that we don't need your permission to go where we need to go, he explained. Just as we didn't need your permission to position our ships around your worlds. Admiral Rodriguez continued from the projection. Over the past 10 years, we have mapped every facility, cataloged every weapon, and identified every strategic asset possessed by Council species. We know where your leaders sleep, where your children go to school, and where you keep your most classified research projects. The Drakmari representative's tentacles writhed in distress. You've been spying on us! No, Morrison said firmly. We've been protecting you. Every piece of intelligence we gathered was used to maintain peace and stability in Council space. When the Hegemony Coalition planned to attack the Crystalline Collective 3 years ago, human intervention stopped a war before it started. When the Silicon Hierarchy's digital virus escaped containment, human technical teams contained it before it could spread to organic species. Commander Murphy walked casually to the main display panel and placed her hand on what should have been a locked control surface. The display immediately showed detailed technical readouts of every ship in the system, including the Vorthak patrol fleet that was supposed to be protecting the station. Your defensive fleet, Murphy announced, reading, from the display, consists of 12 heavy cruisers, 36 patrol ships, and 6 command vessels. Total firepower equivalent to approximately, she paused to calculate, 1/8 of a single human destroyer. The Vorthak representative leaped to his feet. Our fleet is the most powerful military force in the galaxy. Murphy looked at him with something resembling pity. Ambassador, your fleet couldn't scratch the paint on our escort ships. The vessels you've been seeing around human space aren't warships at all. They're basically armed transport ships we use to move supplies. Rodriguez took over again from the projection. I think it's time for a complete demonstration. Kevin Walsh, our technical officer, will now show you what your sensors actually detect when they scan our ships. The main display changed to show sensor readings from the Vorthak fleet. According to their instruments, the space around the station was completely empty except for a few pieces of space debris and some minor energy fluctuations. Now, Rodriguez said, Kevin is going to turn off our stealth systems. The display exploded with new contacts. Dozens of massive ships appeared on the sensors, so close that collision alarms began wailing throughout the station. The human vessels had been hiding literally right next to the alien ships, invisible and undetected. Sweet mother of stars, whispered Counselor Thexmos, his digital form stabilizing as he focused on the sensor data. The energy readings, the power signatures, how is this possible? Technical Officer Walsh appeared on the projection, a young man with an easy smile that somehow made the situation even more terrifying. Council members, our technology is based on principles your scientists dismissed as impossible about 50 years ago. While you were perfecting the technologies you inherited from previous generations, we were starting from scratch and thinking outside conventional frameworks. He gestured to a display showing human ship specifications. Our shields don't stop energy. They redirect it into parallel dimensional space. Our weapons don't fire projectiles. They temporarily convince matter that it would prefer to be energy. Our engines don't push against space. They politely ask space to move out of the way. Amy Carter, who had been silently recording everything, finally spoke up. How long have we been capable of this? Walsh grinned. Lieutenant Carter, we've been able to do this since about 6 months after first contact with alien life. The hard part wasn't developing the technology, it was learning to hide it convincingly. The council chamber erupted again, but this time the voices carried fear instead of anger. Representatives were frantically trying to contact their military commanders, their intelligence services, and their political leaders. The responses they received only made things worse. Zexathari's communication device crackled with static before. His military commander's voice came through. Ambassador, our entire home fleet is surrounded by vessels that appeared from nowhere. They're not targeting us, but their weapons are powered and aimed. What are your orders? Similar reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The Crystalline Collective's central node was bracketed by human ships that seemed to exist partially outside normal space. The Hegemony Coalition's fortress worlds found themselves hosting human vessels that had somehow materialized inside their defensive perimeters. Morrison stepped forward again. You're beginning to understand the situation. For 10 years, humanity has possessed the capability to end any threat to galactic peace in a matter of hours. We chose not to use that capability because we believed in diplomacy, cooperation, and the possibility of peaceful coexistence. He paused, looking around the chamber at faces that showed shock, fear, and dawning comprehension. Today, you voted to steal our worlds and enslave our people. You laughed about using human children as manual labor. You dismissed us as weak and passive. His voice grew colder with each word. You have forced us to abandon the approach we preferred and embrace the approach you understand. Commander Murphy, still standing calmly in the center of the chamber, checked a device on her wrist. Admiral Morrison, I'm receiving reports that several Council species are attempting to mobilize military responses to our fleet positions. Morrison nodded. Tell them what happens if they continue. Murphy's smile never wavered. Any hostile action against human vessels will result in the immediate neutralization of all military assets belonging to the aggressive species. This neutralization will be precise, complete, and irreversible. The chamber fell silent again as the full scope of humanity's capabilities became clear. They weren't facing a species that had suddenly become dangerous. They were facing a species that had always been dangerous but had chosen to be peaceful. Now that choice had been revoked. Admiral Rodriguez's voice carried one final message from the projection. Council members, you have 5 hours and 37 minutes remaining. I suggest you use them wisely. The council chamber had become a scene of barely controlled chaos. Representatives huddled around communication devices, speaking in urgent whispers to their homeworlds. The responses they received only deepened their panic. Every military installation, every strategic facility, every population center was reporting the same impossible situation. Human ships had appeared everywhere, materializing from empty space like ghosts, becoming solid. Zexathari's communication crackled with the voice of his fleet commander. Ambassador, the humans aren't just surrounding us. They're inside our defensive perimeters. A human ship just materialized in the middle of our formation and politely asked our flagship to move because it was blocking their view. Similar reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The Silicon hierarchy's digital consciousness was experiencing something it had never felt before. True confusion. Our quantum encryption networks are being accessed by entities that shouldn't exist, Thexmos reported, his translated voice carrying electronic static. They're not breaking our codes, they're simply ignoring them entirely. Admiral Morrison watched the growing panic with the detached interest of someone observing an experiment. You're beginning to understand the scope of your miscalculation, he observed calmly. For 10 years, humanity has been the invisible foundation that your entire civilization rested upon. Commander Murphy checked her wrist device again. Admiral, Captain Rachel Moore reports that the rescue operation for the missing colonies is proceeding ahead of schedule. Rescue operation? Vexnall demanded. What rescue operation? Morrison's expression didn't change. Representative Vexnall, did you really believe that 12 million human civilians had simply vanished? That 3 entire colony worlds had gone silent without anyone noticing? The main display activated, showing space around the 3 supposedly missing human colonies. What the Council saw defied everything they thought they knew about defensive warfare. Titan's Rest, New Montana, and Providence Station hung in space surrounded by defensive installations that looked like they had been grown rather than built. Massive structures twisted through space around each world, their surfaces alive with energy patterns that hurt to look at directly. The colonies never went silent, Morrison explained. They went dark. When your coalition partners demanded mining, rights on our worlds, our colonists activated defensive protocols that had been in place since the day they arrived. Captain Moore appeared on the projection, a woman with silver hair and eyes that seemed to hold starlight. Council members, what you're seeing are fully operational planetary defense systems. Each colony world is now protected by technology that makes your most advanced weapons look like throwing sticks. The display zoomed in on New Montana, showing structures that seem to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. They flickered, in and out of visible reality, their true size impossible to determine. "How is this possible?" whispered the Drakmari representative. "We monitored the colonial installations. We saw the supply ships. There were no defensive systems." Moore smiled. "Representative, every supply ship that visited our colonies carried components for these systems. Every mining operation was actually an excavation project. Every peaceful farming community was quietly building the most advanced fortifications in galactic history." Technical Officer Walsh appeared beside Moore. "The really interesting part is that we built these defenses using resources you insisted we didn't need. Those asteroid mining operations you told us to abandon, we were harvesting rare metals for shield generators. Those gas giant harvesting platforms you said were inefficient, we were collecting materials for dimensional anchoring systems." Morrison stepped forward. "You see, Council members, humanity learned an important lesson from our first contact with alien life. Never trust your safety to someone else's goodwill." The display switched to show human installations across the galaxy, but now the full scope was visible. What had appeared to be simple mining operations revealed themselves as massive industrial complexes, space stations that seemed like basic. Research facilities turned out to be shipyards building vessels larger than anything in the Council's imagination. "Every human presence in Council space," Morrison continued, "has been a carefully disguised military installation. Every trade agreement we signed gave us access to strategic resources we needed for our defense projects. Every diplomatic mission gathered intelligence about potential threats to human security." Counselor Thexmos's digital form stabilized as he focused on the data flooding his systems. The computational power required for this deception, the coordination across multiple star systems. How did organic minds accomplish such complexity? Walsh grinned. "Counselor Thexmos, would you like to meet our computational specialists?" The projection switched to show a room filled with beings that made the council members step back in shock. They looked like humans, but their eyes held depths that seemed to contain entire galaxies. When they moved, space around them rippled, slightly, as if reality itself was adjusting to accommodate their presence. "Enhanced humans," Walsh explained casually. "We call them navigators. They exist partially outside normal space-time, which allows them to process information at quantum speeds and coordinate activities across galactic distances instantaneously." One of the navigators looked directly at the council through the projection. When she spoke, her voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Greetings, council members. I am Navigator Sarah Kim. For the past 10 years, my colleagues and I have been managing human operations across your territories while simultaneously monitoring your activities for potential threats to galactic stability." The Crystalline Collective's representative leaned forward. "Monitoring our activities? What gives you the right?" Navigator Kim's expression remained serene. "The same right that gives you the authority to vote on the disposition of human territories, the ability to enforce our will through superior power." Her smile was gentle but terrifying. "The difference is that we chose to exercise that power responsibly." Morrison activated another display showing a timeline stretching back 10 years. "Every crisis the Council has faced, every threat that has been mysteriously resolved, every disaster that was averted by fortunate coincidence has been the result of human intervention." The timeline highlighted dozens of events. The Hegemony Coalition's planned attack on the Crystalline Collective that never happened, the Silicon hierarchy's digital virus that mysteriously vanished, the pirate fleets that disappeared without explanation, the resource conflicts that resolved themselves through sudden discoveries of new deposits. The war between the Vorthak Empire and the Drakmari Collective 3 years ago, Morrison continued, pointing to a specific entry on the timeline. You remember how their fleets mysteriously suffered simultaneous engine failures just before the battle? Zexathari's scaled face went pale. That was you? Captain Barnes appeared on the projection, her cheerful expression unchanged. Both fleets were disabled by systems they couldn't detect, transported to neutral space, and repaired by human engineering teams. The cover story about solar flare interference was our idea. We saved approximately 40 million lives that day, Navigator Kim added. Both species thanked the miraculous coincidence that prevented the battle. Morrison looked around the chamber at faces showing shock, fear, and growing comprehension. For 10 years, humanity has been the secret guardian of galactic peace. We prevented wars, eliminated threats, and maintained stability while allowing you to believe you were in control of your own destinies. The countdown timer showed 4 hours and 23 minutes remaining. Commander Murphy received another transmission and turned to Morrison. Admiral, I'm receiving reports that several Council species are attempting to negotiate separate peace agreements with our fleet commanders. Are they offering to honor human territorial claims? They're offering to surrender their own territories in exchange for protection from other Council species. Morrison nodded calmly. Inform them that humanity is no longer accepting applications for protectorate status. They had 10 years to choose cooperation over exploitation. He turned back to the Council chamber. You have 4 hours and 23 minutes to decide whether you want to be our partners or our former neighbors. But understand this. The era of human protection for alien civilization ends today. From this moment forward, you are responsible for your own survival. The silence that followed was broken only by the hum of alien communication devices and the distant sound of human warships moving into final positions around the station. The galaxy's most powerful beings sat in their great chamber, finally understanding that they had never been powerful at all. They had simply been protected by someone who chose to remain invisible. Admiral Morrison stood perfectly still in the center of the Council chamber, watching as panic spread through the assembled representatives like a disease. The diplomatic mask he had worn for 10 years was completely gone, replaced by something the Council had never seen before, a human who had stopped pretending to be harmless. 5 hours and 37 minutes, he repeated Rodriguez's words calmly. That should be enough time for you to contact your governments and explain the new reality of galactic politics. Councillor Vexnal of the Hegemony Coalition pushed forward, his face flushed with anger and fear. You cannot make demands of the Galactic Council. We represent the combined authority of 46 civilized species. Morrison turned to look at him with eyes that seemed completely empty of the patience and courtesy the Council had grown accustomed to. Representative Vexnal, your coalition controls 17 star systems and maintains a fleet of 200 vessels. As of 30 minutes ago, every single one of those ships is surrounded by human warships they cannot see, cannot track, and cannot escape from. He activated his device again, and the projection showed a tactical display of hegemony space. Red dots surrounded every coalition ship, every space station, and every planetary defense platform. Your combined military might, Morrison continued, in the same flat tone, represents approximately 4% of human naval capacity. Your civilized authority extends exactly as far as we allow it to extend. Commander Murphy, still standing casually in the chamber, checked her wrist device again. Admiral, I'm receiving confirmation from Captain Nicole Barnes that our escort vessels are ready for full disclosure protocols. Morrison nodded. Do it. The main display switched to show space around the council station. What had appeared to be empty void suddenly filled with ships as stealth systems deactivated across the human fleet. But these weren't the massive warships that had appeared earlier. These were the small escort vessels that council members had been seeing around human space for years. Ladies, gentlemen, and distinguished beings, Morrison said, I would like to introduce you to Captain Nicole Barnes and the truth about our escort program. A new face appeared on the projection. A woman with short brown hair and eyes that sparkled with barely contained laughter. Behind her, the bridge of what everyone had assumed was a simple patrol ship revealed itself to be something entirely different. Council members, Barnes said cheerfully. For 10 years, you've been seeing our cute little patrol boats escorting human convoys through your space. You've commented on how pathetically small they are compared to your own vessels. You've joked about how we must be compensating for our lack of military power. The display zoomed in on one of the escort ships. Its hull began to unfold like a mechanical flower, revealing weapons systems that defied everything the Council thought they knew about physics and engineering. Each escort vessel, Barnes continued, carries more firepower than your largest dreadnoughts. We've just been keeping the weapons powered down and the advanced systems hidden. Her smile widened. We didn't want to make anyone nervous. The Drakmari representative's tentacles had gone completely white. Those ships, we've seen them hundreds of times. They pass through our space constantly. You're saying they were armed the entire time? Not just armed, Barnes replied. Each one was capable of sterilizing every inhabited planet in your system in under an hour. But you seem so proud of your own military. We didn't want to hurt your feelings by mentioning it. Zexathari leaned forward, his scaled hands shaking. How many of these vessels do you have? Morrison answered for Barnes. Currently operational, about 3,000. In various stages of construction, another 12,000. But those are just the escort class. Our actual military vessels are somewhat more impressive. The projection switched to show Admiral Rodriguez again. Behind her, massive shapes moved. Past the viewports of her ship, vessels so large they seemed to bend space around them. The ships you've seen today, Rodriguez said, represent about 10% of human naval forces. The rest are positioned in systems you don't know exist, protecting trade routes you've never heard of, and maintaining peace in regions of space that your maps show as empty void. Technical Officer Walsh appeared beside Rodriguez. Council members, I'd like to explain something about human exploration patterns. When we first achieved faster-than-light travel, we didn't head straight for the nearest alien civilization. We spent 50 years mapping the galaxy, establishing supply bases, and building infrastructure in the spaces between your territories. The main display showed a map of the galaxy that made every council member gasp. What they had believed to be the complete chart of known space turned out to represent less than 30% of human-mapped territory. Vast regions marked as unexplored or uninhabitable showed human installations, colonies, and industrial facilities. While you were fighting over the same star systems your ancestors claimed, Walsh continued, we were building a civilization in the places you ignored. The asteroid fields you considered worthless, we turned them into manufacturing centers. The nebulae your ships couldn't navigate, we built cities inside them. The dead systems with no useful planets, we harvested their suns for energy. Counselor Thexmos's digital form flickered rapidly as he processed the implications. The resource shortages, the trade disputes, you could have ended them at any time. Morrison's expression remained coldly neutral. Yes, we could have provided unlimited resources, advanced technology, and solutions to every problem the Council faced. We chose not to because we believed you needed to learn to cooperate with each other without outside intervention. And now, whispered the representative from the Crystalline Collective, now you've demonstrated that cooperation is impossible, and that the strong will always attempt to exploit the weak. Morrison paused. Unfortunately for you, you misidentified which category humanity belongs to. Amy Carter, who had been recording everything in stunned silence, finally found her voice. Admiral Morrison, why didn't Earth Command tell the diplomatic corps about any of this? Morrison looked at her with something that might have been sympathy. Amy, every human diplomat assigned to Council space volunteered for the position knowing they would be kept in the dark about our true capabilities. We needed authentic reactions to alien condescension and dismissal. If you had known that human patrol ships could destroy entire fleets, your responses to alien aggression would have been different. You let us be humiliated for 10 years? We let you sacrifice your pride to maintain peace, Morrison corrected. Every insult you absorbed, every time you bit back a response to alien arrogance, every moment you spent being dismissed as harmless, bought time for diplomacy to work. He turned back to face the council chamber. Today, diplomacy failed. You voted to enslave humanity despite 10 years of peaceful cooperation. You laughed about using our children as manual labor. You treated the loss of 12 million human civilians as an amusing footnote to your power grab. Commander Murphy stepped forward. Admiral, I'm receiving reports from across the galaxy. Human assets are moving to secure all strategic positions. Colonial defense systems are coming online. Deep space monitoring stations are switching from passive observation to active targeting protocols. The main display showed the galactic map again, but now it revealed the true scope of human presence. Thousands of installations that had been invisible to council sensors appeared as glowing points of light. Trade routes that aliens had used for centuries turned out to pass directly through human-controlled territory. Council members, Morrison said quietly, for 10 years, you have lived under human protection without knowing it. We eliminated pirates before they could threaten your shipping. We prevented wars before they could start. We maintained the peace that allowed your civilizations to prosper. He looked around the chamber at faces showing shock, fear, and dawning understanding. That protection is hereby withdrawn. From this moment forward, you are responsible for your own security, your own peace, and your own survival. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I hope you're better at defending yourselves than you were at recognizing who was defending you. The countdown timer on the main display showed 5 hours and 11 minutes remaining. Outside the great windows, human warships hung in space like sleeping giants, their weapons powered and ready. Inside the chamber, the most powerful political body in the known galaxy sat in stunned silence, finally understanding that they had never been. The ones in control, they had just been allowed to think they were. The countdown timer showed 3 hours and 47 minutes when the first species broke. The representative from the Tau Ceti Collective, a small trading confederation that had voted with the majority, stood up with shaking hands and formally requested permission to address Admiral Morrison. Honored Admiral, the representative began, his voice cracking with fear. The Tau Ceti Collective wishes to formally withdraw its vote regarding human territorial reallocation. We, We had no idea of the true situation. Morrison looked at him with eyes that showed no emotion. Representative Keltar, your collective controls 6 trading stations and maintains a fleet of 30 cargo vessels. According to my information, you voted in favor of using human children as manual labor in your deep space mining operations. We didn't understand, Keltar protested. We believed humans were a primitive species that needed guidance. You believed wrong, Morrison replied flatly. Your mining operations are currently suspended. Human vessels have taken control of your facilities to ensure the safety of all workers, both alien and human. The main display activated to show the Tau Ceti mining stations. What had been bustling industrial facilities were now quiet, their operations halted by human ships that hung nearby like silent sentinels. Captain Nicole Barnes appeared on the projection. Admiral Morrison, our inspection teams have found some interesting things in the Tau Ceti facilities. Representative Keltar, would you like to explain the working conditions we discovered? Keltar's face went ashen. Captain Barnes, I assure you that all labor practices meet Galactic Council standards. Which is exactly the problem, Barnes interrupted. Council standards apparently include 18-hour work shifts, inadequate life support systems, and punishment chambers for workers who fail to meet quotas. The display showed footage from inside the mining stations. The working conditions were appalling. Beings of various species laboring in dangerous environments with minimal protection, sleeping in overcrowded quarters, and eating rations that barely qualified as food. These facilities, Barnes continued, employ approximately 12,000 workers from 15 different species. According to our medical teams, malnutrition and preventable diseases are rampant throughout the workforce. Morrison's voice remained perfectly calm. Representative Keltar, you voted to subject human children to these conditions. Your collective has been profiting from what can only be described as slavery for over 2 decades. It's not slavery, Keltar protested. The workers are paid. They have contracts. Commander Murphy, still standing in the council chamber, checked her device. Representative Keltar, our legal teams have reviewed those contracts. The workers are paid in credits that can only be spent at company stores. The debt they accumulate for food, shelter, and transportation ensures they can never leave. According to human legal standards, this constitutes slavery. The chamber filled with uncomfortable murmurs as other representatives realized their own labor practices were about to be examined under human scrutiny. Navigator Kim's voice cut through the noise from the projection. Council members, humanity has been aware of these conditions for years. We have repeatedly submitted proposals for improved worker protections, fair wages, and basic safety standards. These proposals have been consistently rejected as economically unfeasible. Admiral Rodriguez appeared beside Kim. What the Council didn't know is that we've been secretly providing medical care, supplemental nutrition, and basic necessities to workers throughout Council space. Every accident that resulted in improved working conditions, every unexpected food shipment, every coincidental medical supply delivery was part of humanitarian operations. The display showed a map highlighting hundreds of facilities across Council territory. Each one showed evidence of covert human intervention, medical teams that appeared during emergencies, supply shipments that arrived during shortages, and safety equipment that mysteriously appeared after accidents. For 10 years, Rodriguez continued, humanity has been spending billions of credits to alleviate suffering that Council labor practices created. We fed your workers, healed your sick, and protected your vulnerable while you profited from their exploitation. Zexathari leaned forward in his seat. You had no right to interfere with our internal affairs. Morrison turned to look at him with an expression that made the alien ambassador shrink back. Ambassador Zexathari, when your internal affairs involve the systematic abuse of sentient beings, it becomes our affair. When you vote to subject human children to conditions we've spent a decade trying to improve for others, it becomes our primary concern. Technical Officer Walsh appeared on the projection with data displays that made several council members visibly uncomfortable. Representatives, I'd like to share some statistics about worker productivity in human-protected facilities versus standard council operations. The numbers were staggering. Facilities where humans had secretly intervened showed productivity increases of 300%, accident rates reduced by 90%, and worker satisfaction scores that were literally off the council's measurement scales. These improvements, Walsh explained, were achieved through basic measures: adequate food, reasonable working hours, proper safety equipment, and medical care. The cost of these improvements represented less than 2% of facility profits. Representative Keltar stared at the data in shock. 2%? You're saying we could have improved conditions for 2% of profits? Representative, Morrison said quietly, you could have eliminated worker suffering for less than you spend on decorating your corporate offices. You chose not to, because you could get away with not caring. The silence that followed was broken by another representative standing up. The Hegemony Coalition's secondary ambassador, a younger alien who had been quiet throughout the session, stepped forward. Admiral Morrison, she said, her voice carrying a tremor, some of us genuinely didn't know how bad things were. If you had told us, if you had shown us this data, Representative Valneth, Morrison replied. Humanity submitted over 200 formal reports documenting these conditions. Every single report was dismissed as human emotional overreaction or cultural misunderstanding. Your own coalition leader called our concerns about child labor typical human sentimentality. The display showed archived footage of council sessions where human representatives had tried to address worker conditions. In every case, the concerns were dismissed with condescending explanations about how different species had different needs and tolerances. Navigator Kim's voice carried a note of sadness. Representative Valneth, we wanted to believe that knowledge would lead to compassion. We spent 10 years providing evidence, documenting abuses, and offering solutions. The response was always the same. Profit was more important than suffering. Commander Murphy received another transmission and turned to Morrison. Admiral, Captain Moore reports that worker liberation operations are proceeding across all targeted facilities. Approximately 2.3 million beings have been evacuated from substandard conditions and are receiving medical treatment aboard human hospital ships. Liberation operations? Counselor Thexmos asked, his digital form flickering rapidly. Morrison nodded. Every worker in council space who wants to leave their current employment is being offered that opportunity. We're providing transportation, medical care, job training, and placement in facilities that meet human standards for worker treatment. You can't just steal our workforce, Vexnall shouted. We're not stealing anyone, Morrison replied calmly. We're offering choices to people who previously had none. The fact that millions are choosing to leave tells you everything you need to know about the conditions you created. The countdown timer showed 3 hours and 12 minutes remaining. Representatives were now openly arguing among themselves, some demanding immediate surrender to human terms, while others insisted on maintaining their positions. The unity that had allowed them to vote against humanity was crumbling as the reality of their situation became clear. Morrison watched the chaos with detached interest. 10 years of diplomatic patience had ended with a unanimous vote to enslave his species. Now the Council was learning what happened when humanity stopped being patient and started being honest about their capabilities. The timer continued its relentless countdown, each passing minute bringing the galaxy closer to a new reality where human kindness was no longer taken for granted and human power was no longer hidden. 3 hours and 11 minutes remained for the Council to decide whether they wanted to be part of that new reality or become a footnote in its history. The countdown timer showed 37 minutes when the Galactic Council's unity finally shattered completely. What had begun as panicked whispers between representatives had escalated into open shouting matches as species blamed each other for the catastrophic situation they now faced. Zexthari of the Vorthak Empire stood at the center of the chaos, his scaled fists pounding on the podium. "This is madness. We cannot surrender to a species that was fetching our coffee 10 years ago." "They were never fetching our coffee," Representative Valneth shot back, her voice shaking with fear and anger. "They were watching us, studying us, and apparently planning for exactly this moment." Councillor Thexmos's digital form flickered wildly as conflicting data streams overwhelmed his processing capacity. The computational requirements, the level of coordination. How did we miss this for so long? Admiral Morrison stood calmly in the observer section, watching the collapse of galactic government with the same detached interest he had shown throughout the crisis. Amy Carter stood beside him, her recording equipment capturing every moment of the breakdown. "Admiral," Amy whispered, "they're completely falling apart." Morrison nodded slightly. "Amy, this is what happens when a power structure built on bullying encounters someone who can't be bullied. They have no idea how to handle a situation where threats don't work." The main display activated without any input from council members, showing Admiral Rodriguez on the bridge of her command ship. Behind her, human officers worked with calm efficiency that contrasted sharply with the panic in the council chamber. "Council members," Rodriguez said, her voice cutting through the arguments, "you have 37 minutes remaining. I thought you might want to know what we're seeing from our position." The display switched to show space around the council. Station, but now every human ship was visible. Hundreds of vessels hung in perfect formation, their weapons powered but not yet targeted. The sight silenced the arguing representatives instantly. "What you're looking at," Rodriguez continued, "is less than 5% of human naval forces. The ships you see represent a single battle group out of 63 currently deployed across the galaxy." Captain Barnes appeared beside Rodriguez. "Council members, I'd like to share some final statistics with you. In the 38 minutes since Admiral Morrison delivered our ultimatum, human forces have taken control of every strategic position in Council space." The display showed a tactical map that made several representatives gasp. Red indicators marked human-controlled positions throughout the galaxy. Every major shipyard, every communication relay, every resource extraction facility, and every military installation. "How is this possible?" whispered the Drakmari representative, his tentacles pale with shock. Technical Officer Walsh appeared on the projection with his characteristic cheerful smile. "Representative, we've been in position for years. Every facility you built, every system you established, every defensive position you created was planned around existing human installations. You just couldn't see us." Navigator Kim's voice carried across the chamber from the projection. "Council members, I want you to understand something important. This isn't a conquest. This is a revelation. Human forces have been protecting your civilization for 10 years while remaining completely invisible to your sensors. She paused, her galaxy-deep eyes focusing on each representative in turn. Today, you voted to enslave humanity. In response, we're simply removing the invisibility that allowed you to believe you were in charge. Commander Murphy checked her wrist device and turned to Morrison. Admiral, all Council military assets have been secured. 0 casualties reported across all operations. 0 casualties? Vexnall demanded. How can you take control of entire fleets without casualties? Captain Moore appeared on the projection, her silver hair catching starlight from the ship's viewports. Representative Vexnall, human technology doesn't require us to destroy things we want to control. Your ships are perfectly functional. They simply can't move without our permission. The display showed images from across the galaxy, alien warships, hanging motionless in space while human vessels maintained positions nearby. Massive battle cruisers and dreadnoughts that had been the pride of their respective fleets now drifted helplessly, their crews unharmed but completely powerless. Your weapons still work, Moore continued. Your life support is fully operational. Your crews are safe and comfortable. You just can't go anywhere or shoot at anything until we decide to let you. Morrison stepped forward as the timer showed 24 minutes remaining. Council members, humanity is offering you one final opportunity to avoid the complete dissolution of your governmental body. What are your terms? Representative Keltar asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Morrison activated his device, and a document appeared on every representative's personal display. The terms were simple, clear, and absolutely non-negotiable. Immediate withdrawal from all human territories. Morrison read aloud. Recognition of human sovereignty over currently occupied systems. Establishment of human oversight for all labor practices involving sentient beings. Reparations for damages caused by Council policies to human and non-human workers. He paused, looking around the chamber. And finally, restructuring of the Galactic Council to include human representatives with veto power over any decisions affecting the treatment of sentient beings. Veto power? Zexathari sputtered. You're demanding control over the entire Council! We're demanding the authority to prevent this situation from happening again, Morrison replied calmly. You've demonstrated that without oversight you will choose profit over the welfare of sentient beings. That ends today. Representative Valneth stood up slowly. Admiral Morrison, if we accept these terms, what guarantee do we have that humanity won't simply become the new oppressor? Morrison looked at her with something that might have been respect. Representative Valneth, that's an excellent question. The answer is that you have no guarantees, except our track record. Navigator Kim appeared larger on the projection, her presence seeming to fill the chamber. Representative Valneth, for 10 years humanity has possessed the power to control or destroy your civilizations. Instead, we use that power to protect you from threats you never knew existed, to prevent wars you never realized were starting, and to alleviate suffering you chose to ignore. The choice, Admiral Rodriguez added, has always been yours. You can work with us as partners, or you can discover what the galaxy looks like without human protection. The timer showed 18 minutes remaining when the first formal surrender came. Representative Keltar of the Tau Ceti Collective stood and formally accepted all human terms on behalf of his people. The Tau Ceti Collective formally withdraws its vote regarding human territories and accepts human oversight of labor practices, he announced, his voice carrying defeat and relief in equal measure. One by one, other representatives began to stand. The smaller trading confederations surrendered first, followed by the mid-level powers, and finally, the major civilizations. Each acceptance was recorded by Amy Carter and transmitted to human forces across the galaxy. With 7 minutes remaining, on the countdown, only the Vorthak Empire, the Hegemony Coalition, and the Silicon Hierarchy held out. Zexathari stood defiantly at the podium. The Vorthak Empire will never surrender to inferior beings. Our military might. Ambassador Zexathari, Navigator Kim interrupted, her voice carrying infinite patience. Your military might consists of ships that cannot move and weapons that cannot fire. Your home world is currently protected by human vessels from an asteroid. Storm your scientists haven't detected yet. Your choice is simple. Surrender with dignity or be carried into the new galactic order. With 3 minutes remaining, Counselor Thexmos of the Silicon Hierarchy signaled acceptance. His digital consciousness had finally processed the full scope of human capabilities and concluded that resistance was mathematically impossible. At 2 minutes, the Hegemony Coalition surrendered when Representative Vexnall received word that human forces had already begun redistributing resources from coalition warehouses to worker relief efforts. With 30 seconds remaining, Zexathari looked around the chamber at his isolated position and formally surrendered on behalf of the Vorthak Empire. The timer reached 0 as Admiral Morrison stepped forward to address the Council for the final time. Ladies, gentlemen, and distinguished beings, the vote taken earlier today to reallocate human territories is hereby nullified. The Galactic Council is dissolved, effective immediately. He paused as shocked gasps filled the chamber. In its place, we are establishing the Galactic Cooperative, with human representatives ensuring that the mistakes of the past 10 years are never repeated. Admiral Rodriguez appeared on the main display one final time. Council members, humanity tried peace. You mistook our courtesy for weakness, our patience for stupidity, and our restraint for inability. We won't make the mistake of being polite again. Her image was replaced by a view of human ships moving into defensive positions around every inhabited world in the galaxy. The message was clear. The age of human invisibility was over. Morrison collected his device and walked toward the exit. As he passed each representative, he offered a polite nod that somehow managed to be more terrifying than any threat. Amy, he said quietly as they left the CH,